welcome to my channel. This is Makeup by Mackenzie, and I'm Mackenzie, obviously. In this episode of Makeup 101, we're going to be talking about eyeshadow. What do you need to know about eyeshadow? Both how to find and pick out good eyeshadow, as well as how to apply it. So we're going to do a basic 3 eyeshadow look, which is easy to do, easy to master. And then once you have mastered that, it can be easily expanded into more complicated eye looks. So let's play with some makeup, shall we? So let's start off by talking about how do you know good eyeshadow from bad eyeshadow, and how do you pick out good eyeshadow. Good eyeshadow is pigmented and blendable. So let's break that down. What does pigmented mean? Well, it just means it has a lot of pigment, or it has a lot of color. It's easy to get a lot of color payoff when you put it onto your eyes. So for example, let's compare 2 eyeshadow palettes. This is the Urban Decay Naked 3 palette, and this is the Maybelline Blushed Nudes palette. And this is supposed to be a dupe for this palette, which basically means that they're supposed to be very, very similar. This comes from the high-end section of the store, and this is a drugstore option. I'm just going to swatch some shades here for you so you can kind of get an idea of what they look like. The first color I'm going to swatch is the shade Limit from the Urban Decay Naked 3 palette. So I'm just going to take some of it on my finger here and just swatch it right there for you. So we see that shade there? Alright, so now I'm going to take a shade from the Maybelline palette that's supposed to be very similar. It's that shade right there. And I'm going to swatch that for you right next to it. So you see it right here? Exactly, you've got this shade that is really easy to see, and this shade which is really not easy to see, and they're supposedly similar, but they're not. This one is clearly more pigmented than this one. Now let's talk about blendability. What does blendable mean? Blendability is how well does it apply, and how well does it create a smooth, seamless blend. You don't want to be sitting here for a long time really working at your eyeshadow to make it look the way that you want it to look. You want it to be easy to work with, and that is what blendable is. One thing you hear YouTubers talk a lot about is the texture of the eyeshadow, and you have 3 different types of textures that are often talked about, which are buttery, chalky, and powdery. So I'm going to go through each of those and explain to you what those are. Buttery and chalky are exactly the opposite of each other. Buttery means that it has a soft, smooth texture, whereas chalky means that it feels like chalk. It feels powdery, it feels dry. Buttery texture is often a good sign that a eyeshadow is pigmented, whereas chalky is often a sign that it's not very pigmented. That doesn't mean that an eyeshadow can't be drier and still have great pigment, but oftentimes they're kind of associated with each other. Now let's talk about powdery. Powdery does not mean that an eyeshadow is good or bad. It just simply means it's not as firmly pressed as some other eyeshadows. A lot of times that comes down to personal preference. Do you prefer to have an eyeshadow that doesn't have a whole lot of kickback, or is it something that you're fine with? That happens within reason. If you have a good eyeshadow palette. For example, this is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Modern Renaissance palette, and this palette tends to be very powdery. However, a later palette that Anastasia brought out called the Subculture palette was way too powdery. And it wasn't as easy to work with as the shadows in here. These shadows are very pigmented, but also very blendable. So the powderiness of this eyeshadow palette is not seen as a bad thing. Whereas in the Subculture palette, it was pigmented, but not at all blendable, which made the powderiness of the eyeshadow really hard to work with. Let me show you what I mean about powdery. I'm just going to take a brush, and I'm going to take the shade Tempera, right here. You see all the powder that came off of that? Here, let me do it again. You see that? That's what powdery is. But that doesn't mean that this eyeshadow is bad. It just simply means it's powdery. It's something to look out for, and something to think about when it comes to working with eyeshadows that are like that. Let's talk about finishes really quick. There are a few different types of finishes of eyeshadows that you can keep in mind to create different looks. The first one is matte, and it's basically the same thing as when I talked about matte foundation. It simply means that it has no shine whatsoever. This is the Anastasia Modern Renaissance palette again. And this is this shade Red Ochre. That is matte. It has no shine whatsoever. I can move it around, I can do it, and it will have no glitter, nothing. The next finish we're going to talk about is satin. And satin basically means that it has a very soft sheen to it. As an example, we're going to take this shade right here from the Morphe 35O palette. You see that? It has just a subtle sheen to it. It's not vibrant, but it's enough that it would give a really nice little wash of kind of sheen on your eyelid or on the inner corner of your eye. The next finish is metallic, and this is the one that is the most high shine out of all of the finishes. A good example is the Maybelline Expert Wear eyeshadow in the shade New York Silver. You see that? It is extremely shiny, and it has a metallic finish, which simply means that it looks like metal. So this looks a lot like actual silver. Now the next finish is shimmer. And shimmer is simply in between a satin and a metallic finish. It's going to be anywhere in between there, so it could be very similar to a metallic, or it could be more similar to a satin. It's just somewhere in between. For this one, we're going to look at this shade Champagne Truffle from the Too Faced Chocolate Bar palette. So this is the satin one, this is the metallic, and this is the shimmer. So it's not nearly as shiny as the metallic, but it's definitely more shiny than the satin finish. And it's certainly more shiny than the matte finish. Now before we move on to the actual application of the eyeshadow, let's talk about the different parts of the eye. The first part is the lid, and that's the part that covers your eye. There are 3 sections of this of the lid that you should know about, and these are sections that a lot of YouTubers will use to describe how they apply and where to put the eyeshadow. So the first one is the inner third, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It is this section of your eyelid that covers the inner third, that is the inner third of your eyelid. Then there's the outer third, and then of course the center. The same goes for the crease, and the crease is this section right here, where basically you have a fold in your eyelid. That is called the crease. There's 3 different sections to that as well. There's the inner crease, which is essentially from the half point of your lid towards the inner corner. The outer crease, which is from the halfway point all the way to the outer corner of your eye. And then there's the outer V, which is this little V area on your outer corner of your eye, where this outer corner and the crease meet. Next is the inner corner of your eye, and it's this part right here, kind of on the inside of your nose and your eye. Then the brow bone, which is exactly what it feels like. It's the part under your eye where you can actually feel the bone. Then the upper and lower lash line. It's exactly where your eyelid and your eyelashes meet. And then your upper and lower waterline are on the inside, basically underneath your lashes, right on this line between your eyeball and your eyelashes. Another thing people talk about a lot is your eye shape, and honestly your eye shape can get really complicated. Some styles tend to look better on one eye shape than another. That rule can be broken. However, it is good to know what looks good on your eye shape so that you can kind of build off of that. So I'm going to link down below a great article on describing eye shape so that you can help kind of read up about what your eye shape might possibly be, and you can start looking for tutorials and things on that specific eye shape. For me, I have hooded eyes, which basically means that when my eye is open, most of my lid is hidden by my crease, essentially. Alright, so let's get to creating this eyeshadow look. Like I said earlier, we're doing a 3 eyeshadow look, which basically means it just has 3 shades. And this is really easy to build off of, as well as a really easy thing to just try different colors, different shapes, things like that with this type of look. And I'm going to use the Too Faced Chocolate Bar palette to do this. This is a great natural palette and is really great for beginners. When it comes to creating eyeshadow looks, there are 2 types of brushes that I think are essential. And those are your flat packing brushes and your blending brushes. Packing brushes are simply flat and wide. And having a range of sizes is definitely helpful for getting into smaller places, getting into bigger places, putting on more color, things like that. But just having one would serve you for a look like this. The blending brushes are fluffier brushes. They're not as tightly packed, they're a little bit fluffier. And having a variety of sizes for these is definitely helpful. But again, 1 or 2 for this look would serve you well. Before you do anything to your eye, you want to add an eyeshadow primer. And a primer is simply like a foundation primer. It creates a base for your eyeshadow, and it helps your eyeshadow to stay on for a long time. This base can also help your eyeshadow to really pop. A lot of eyeshadows become more pigmented when they have a base. So this is the NYX Proof It Waterproof Eyeshadow Primer, which is nice because it makes your eyeshadow look waterproof. I'm just going to take a little bit of it right there and then blend it in with my finger. And then you want to let it set before you add any eyeshadow to it. I start off every look. This is not one of the eyeshadows that I'm going to be including this look, but I'm just sharing that I start off every single look by putting down a base of an eyeshadow that matches my skin tone, and I just take a fluffy brush to do it. This is the Sonia Kashuk number 109 brush, and this is the Wet n Wild single in Creme Brûlée. I just take some of that and I start on my brow bone like that and just move it down towards the crease. And adding this layer helps to blend out your eyeshadows. It makes it a lot easier to get a seamless blend. Some people like to cover their entire lid with an eyeshadow like this, and that's perfectly fine. And that works very well. Just simply because I have oily lids and hooded eyes, it tends to cause my eyeshadow to crease a little bit more if I put a base down first, an eyeshadow base down first. So I just take it and put it along my brow bone and start sweeping it down towards the crease. We're going to start off with a shade that is called both the crease shade and a transition shade. It's called the crease shade when it is your only color in the crease, but it's called a transition shade when you're planning on layering more shades on top of it. The transition shade should be one that is slightly darker than your skin tone, but not as dark as what you're planning on doing for your eye. So that way it creates a seamless transition between a dark shade and your skin tone, so you don't have an abrupt separation between the two. It just creates kind of a nice seamless look. So for my crease eyeshadow, I'm going to take this shade, which is Salted Caramel, and just take a little bit on my brush. Always start off with just a little bit of eyeshadow and kick off a little bit so that you can control the amount you're putting on. It's easier to put more eyeshadow on than it is to take it off. So be careful and just slowly build up to get the pigment that you want. And when you're blending, you want to use windshield wiper motion starting at the outer corner and blending in towards the inner crease. And then when you get to the outer corner, use circular motions. And you want to hold your brush further back. You don't want to hold it up here because then you're going to end up cramming your eyeshadow in. And to get more of a kind of fluffy look, you want to hold your brush further away so you have a little bit of a lighter hand. And if you want to add more eyeshadow, you can. If you want to make it more pigmented, you can. For now, I'm going to leave this here. Now I'm going to do my outer third shade. And this is going to be the darkest shade that I use. And I'm going to use this shade, Semi-Sweet, from this palette. And I'm just going to start off with a packing brush, so a flat packing brush. I'm just going to pack some of that onto this brush. I'm going to start on the outer third of the eye, just start doing little packing motions. Like that. And I'm starting to bring it up into the crease a little bit. So now when you've got that down and you're happy with the amount of pigment, you can take the same fluffy brush, or you can take a slightly smaller fluffy brush and just blend in and blend that shade in with your crease shade. And if you're having trouble blending it in, you can always take a little bit more of that crease shade and go over the top of it. So now that we have our crease done, before we move on to the eyelid shade, I'm going to take a clean fluffy brush and I'm going to go along the edges of the crease. So where the crease meets the brow bone, I'm just going to lightly go over those edges and just blend them out. And when you think you're done blending, blend some more. If you're having trouble getting it blended out the way you want to, You can take some more of that shade that matches your skin tone and just go over the edges with that a little bit and use that to blend it in. Do you see the difference? Well, this one looks a little bit more blown out and this one looks a little bit harsh. This one looks very soft and romantic and this one doesn't. Alrighty, so we've got both sides blended out now. And now we're going to do our lid shade. The lid shade provides really nice contrast for this outer corner shade. This outer corner shade creates a lot of depth, and if you want even more depth, you could add an even darker shade to the outer V. But we're not going to go there for this look, because we're going to keep it nice and simple. I like to use a shimmery shade or a metallic shade for this part. It adds a lot of brightness to the eye. However, for a very classic and simple look, a matte shade is really nice. If you're not doing a smoky eye, you don't want to go dark with this shade. You want to go lighter. So I'm going to go with the shade Champagne Truffle from this palette, which is this shade right here. And you can apply it two different ways. You can take your packing brush and you can pack some of that on there and do the same and then pack it onto the lid, which works perfectly fine. Or you can take your finger and you can pack it on with your finger. I personally really like to pack it on with my finger for shimmery or metallic shades because I find that it tends to get a lot more pigment that way. So now I'm just going to take that crease brush again, and I'm just going to go along the edge there and blend the crease in, just so there's a seamless blend. And then I'm going to take that a smaller fluffy brush, or you can take the packing brush, and I'm just going to go in vertical motions along the line between my outer third shade and my inner 2/3 shade, just to blend those two together. And there we have it. We have our finished eye look. If you want to make this look a little bit more nighttime, which right now it looks very nice for daytime, but to make it a little bit more nighttime, you can add some more of those shades under your eye. So I'm going to take a smudging brush. This is from Real Techniques, and it's just a little brush that's very tightly packed. And I'm going to take Salted Caramel onto this brush, and I'm just going to run it right up close along that lower lash line. I'm also going to take a pointed brush like this. This is just a loose brush. And I'm going to take Champagne Truffle on it. And I'm going to highlight the inner corner of my eye. And it really brightens up the eye. So you see the difference? This one looks really bright and awake. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of this look off camera, and I will be right back. Alright, and this is the finished look. I just added some eyeliner and some mascara and blush and some lipstick and lip gloss, and it completed the look. That's it for today. I hope this really helped you all out, and I hope you learned something from this. Do not be afraid to experiment with color and shapes. Once you've mastered kind of the basics, it's so fun. The world of eyeshadow is simply a playground full of seesaws and carousels and tree swings and all of that stuff. It's just so much fun. Do not be afraid. Do not feel overwhelmed. It's so easy to feel overwhelmed, but there's no reason that you should. Master the basics, master the neutrals, and then start playing. So, remember, makeup has no rules. They're more like guidelines. So, you do you, boo-boo. Alright, bye everybody. See you next time. And this, the outer, buttery is, for example, this is the Anastasia Modern Renaissance palette. No. Maybe I should be talking about this later. I'll talk about this later. Blah, 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 blah. Packing blushes. Blah. Blah. I'm going to use this. Blah. I'm going to use this. And for this, I'm going to use this shade. And for this, I'm going to use the shade Semi-Sweet. Semi-Sweet is hard to say. I'm going to use this.